Hello everyone and welcome to this newest edition of Blitzkrieg. This is Remlace from 40K Theories.
And this is Fiaura. How are all you people doing?
And today we're looking at a race that doesn't have vehicles and no gene sealer cults don't count. Another Zotes. No, we're looking at the Tyranids today. So a bunch of big alien insect dinosaur monstrosities, lots of spiky bits, lots of disgusting dirty weapons I can imagine being on the shelf, and lots of teeth and claws and crushy bits as well. So we're going to start off with one of the most common big Tyranid creatures, the Carnifex. These things are essentially a Lehman Russ tank if a Lehman Russ tank was a dinosaur crossed with a stag beetle. It can withstand impacts from bolt gun rounds, even take hits from las cannon and plasma rounds as well. Now these things weigh around 9 tons and stand around 4.5 meters tall. And they come in a few varieties. They come in the Thornback variety, which basically include short to medium range ballistic parasites and living bomb projectors, and have various thorns across their body, hence the name Thornback. You have the Venom Spitter Carnifex, you have the Bile Beast, and you have the Stone Crusher, which is a pure melee version. Now, these things also can secrete bioplasma from their mouths, which generates a very high-pitched screaming noise, hence their nickname amongst the Imperium, the Screamer Killer.
So, the armored plates on this thing are actually fairly well sloped, it turns out, and can avoid quite a lot of impacts from direct hits. So that means that would explain why it can take a las cannon, because it's hitting, at 30, 40 degrees instead of dead on. However, the further back you shoot it, i.e. the further down its body towards its tail, the more likely you are to get a flat direct hit. All of its bones appear to be made of rib-like structures, which is one of the more stronger and flexible bones in the human body, but let's get into animals, such as rhinos, hippos, and elephants, have stronger rib bones than they do skulls. I guess this is technically what it is capable of resisting. When we talk about an animal that weighs 9 tons, you're talking about a creature that weighs anywhere from twice as much to, I think the heaviest elephant came out to 11.1 tons, so about the size of an elephant. As far as the thorn version, the Thornback, the thorns on its back acting like sensory input are the same type of sensory input that would go for the hairs of a spider. The slightest shift in wind, the slightest change in temperature would be detected. In addition to this, even after you kill the thing, it is full of parasites that can kill you. So long after it's dead, it is probably still killing troops, soldiers, and wildlife, despite the fact it's already been killed.
Noble would approve.
The Avarice version has a mix of eagle eye vision, and venom style from the Spitting Cobra, in the fact that the Spitting Cobra's venom is actually slightly crystallized until impact, at which point it becomes a liquid. In this case, however, it has chosen to add additional blood clotting agents in order to create a fully crystallized attack, basically turning its venom into projectiles of death that are firing out at roughly the speed of a standard bolt gun. The Bylus has a similar set of bioweapons akin to a kamikaze ant. For those who don't know what a kamikaze ant is, it is a South American breed of ant that charges prey and predators alike, latches onto them, injects its venom, and at the site of its venom injection actually causes its biomass to overload and explode. Same concept. In addition to this, it uses a similar technique to a leech or a starfish by using acid to start its digestive process outside of its body. Unlike a spider, which would, cocoon you first and then let the enzymes and pressure do it, it just decides pure acid.
I've now got this very terrifying image in my head of basically a giant insect the size of a Tyrannosaurus Rex running up to you, biting you, then exploding.
Let's be clear. This is not the size of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is still the size of an elephant. But yes, that is the terrifying image that you're probably looking at.
It weighs the same as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, though.
In addition to all of this, the Bylus version carries bacterial spores that are related to necrotizing fasciitis. For those who don't know what this is, it is a bacteria that is very rare, thankfully, and causes necrosis of the skin and whatever body parts it infects. The only known cure for it is actually to remove the body parts that it has infected. It is not something that is instantaneous, however. It takes several weeks and months for it to develop into something truly horrific. But it is pretty terrifying to know that the bacterial spores the Carnifex carries in this case are actually happen in a few seconds. I can see the inspiration for this. Let's take insects, bacteria, and that ant that explodes. That all seems like a good thing to throw together. Lastly, the stone crusher feels like a rhino on steroids.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sorry, I was going to say I can imagine because one of those weapons is literally a wrecking ball, and we're something that's the size of an elephant with a wrecking ball. I can imagine that thing hitting you with the same impact an ankylosaurus tail would, and bear in mind those things can literally liquefy your bones on impact if you was hit with enough force.
So I'm going to get to the dinosaur part, but first let's talk about the size of it. The stone crusher is in fact bigger than all the other ones. It is larger than an alpha elephant that would weigh roughly 12 tons. On average, a stone crusher, after doing significant research and actually getting to talk to a Games Workshop rep this time for a little bit, the stone crusher variant is estimated to weigh between 13 and 14 tons. To illustrate just how heavy that actually is, the Striker mobile fire system only weighs 13.2 tons. And it's a tank destroyer vehicle that carries a 105mm gun. This is a biological organism that weighs more than a wheeled tank destroyer. Going further, one of the tail variants reminds me of the Alkiosaurus. It's a just solid ball. There's another tail variant that actually reminds me of Eupalphalus. Euphocephalus. Really hard to pronounce these dinosaur names. Because the tail actually has two barbs on each side that form into giant hammers. In addition to this, the claws function very similarly to a lobster. They have the same clamping force of roughly 5,000 newtons or 5 tons of force. To illustrate how strong that is, a great white shark applies 4.2 tons of force when it bites something, and it can bite through steel. And it is considered, quote, the literal wrecking ball of Carnifexes because apparently it supposedly can literally roll itself into a ball and roll towards its enemies, showing only its extremely heavily armored plating. To compare this is the Carnifexes are quite literally living, breathing light tanks. Yes, I said they're light tanks. This is because their undersides are actually fairly exposed. There are places on their bodies you can see some of their internal organs, and therefore they can be brought down by small arms fire. A lot of it, but it can still be brought down by small arms fire. In addition to this, the Bylus variant with the jaw that unhinges from two sides completely actually creates a vulnerable spot in which if you were directly under it, you could potentially fire a light explosive such as a grenade or bolter directly into its brain cavity without actually hitting a bone. So it's not entirely invulnerable, it's just terrifying.
Well, there you go then. So next up, we're going to look at the Tyranid Aeroduel. Now this thing actually comes in two major variants. The first one we're going to look at is the Scythe Aeroduel. Now, these things have an estimated maximum speed of 22 kilometers for an hour, which for such a large creature is actually pretty damn fast. It's a lot larger than a Carnifex, and its armoured chitin plates in some places, are up to 30 centimeters thick. Its main weaponry are 2 pairs of huge scything claws, but also has an acidic spray as a secondary defense. And this weighs around up to 14 tons. While the barbed aeroduel, in comparison, has 2 biocannons and 2 scything forelimb claws as well. So it's actually a ranged variant rather than the pure close combat variant of the scythe version.
So I'm going to talk about the scythe variant first. Their armor is indeed almost exactly like the Carnifex's. It is slightly thinner, actually, on the main plates. However, the speak that it can crush its way straight through a tank. I actually went and did the research. To crush a modern main battle tank would require 117,500 newtons of force, or 117.5 kilotons of direct force. That means that this thing slams down with the equivalent force every time it strikes something of the entire payload of a B-29 Super Fortress.
Well, damn. That's a lot of force.
To equate this to you in easier to understand terms, it is literally the equivalent of having a 2-story brick house dropped on you from 2,000 feet. However, the claws are in fact not sharp. Because it uses the claws for its primary mode of transportation, it is constantly striking the ground, grinding it against things, and generally blunting its own claws. There is a purpose for this. In order to maintain the application of force and not glance off of armor, sharpened claws at this end of force need to be blunter and wider, or they would in fact fracture or break, since equal and opposite reaction is one of the laws of physics. It appears as though this one has decided, you know what, I don't need it to be sharp because I can bring it down like literally a brick shithouse on your head. It also has the same weaknesses as the Carnifex. Fair warning, guys. If you can get close to it, you can the barbed version, you can actually shoot up directly into its brain case, and in addition to this, it has some of its internal organs completely exposed. The barbed version, I actually used the size comparison of a Lehman Russ battle cannon, which is 120 millimeters according to game stats, versus the Strangler cannon that it carries, which comes out to 132.7 millimeters in size with the projectile that it would fire out. However, due to this not being a standardized creature and having to measure multiple models in order to get exact sizes, the size of the cannon can vary from 121.1 millimeters to as large as 147.9 millimeters. In addition to this, it is effectively firing what I would consider a tandem sabot warhead, something that currently does not exist. Using the extreme high velocity of sabot with the shredder capability, we would actually be going back in time to previous style weapons, such as the M48 Patton's armor-piercing capped assault warhead, which was a shell designed to deliver the same charge as an armor-piercing hit, but with a capped shot. So that in the event the shell failed to penetrate, the cap shot would still detonate, causing damage to the vehicle anyway, or at least weakening the armor so the next shot would be able to penetrate. However, the barbed variant, unlike its scythe brethren, further lacks armor, and because of the differences in shape, the armor has many flat areas. Also, the extreme heavy chitin plate that's on it actually has parts that don't overlap properly in comparison to the Carnifex and the Scythe Hierodual, meaning that if you can get on top of it, you can fire directly into exposed flesh between the plating. Furthermore, its ammunition is exposed. While it would not detonate because it's biological, the ammunition, if it were hit with an explosive, the ammo sack could potentially fling this highly volatile tandem warhead shot in every direction, shredding the creature that's carrying it as well as the Tyranid creatures around it. So the barbed one feels like it's a lot more fragile than it would seem, since it has the word Hierodual in front of it. You would think, oh, it's not that fragile. no, in practical terms, this thing's probably very fragile.
So the next creature we got on the list is the Trigon. This thing is a monstrous serpentine creature weighing around 9.7 tons and about 7 meters long, and it burrows underground. It's known to leave deadfall traps and leaving a thin crust over a deep conical hole, which will cause any troops passing by to collapse it and fall in and be collected later for dinner. But these things can also generate a biostatic charge from their carapace and deliver a bioelectric pulse that can kill simply from it exhaling through its gills. Now, this also comes in another variant called the Trigon Prime, which is modified to wield containment spines running the length of their bodies to better harness the bioelectric buildup and further direct it into a more terrifying lightning bolt. And it also adapted to share a synaptic link with the hive mind, so it can actually control and command lesser tyranic creatures.
Well then, let's get started. So this works like an ambush-style predator akin to a diamondback snake, how it would ambush its prey in the desert, or the desert pit spider. Literally creating a pit which cascades and falls because the foundations of the walls of the pit are actually completely non-supportive for anyone to be able to stand on, turning it into a form of quicksand. Due to its sheer size and the fact that it does not have any of its armor plates on its front, it is vulnerable in direct combat and would likely avoid said direct combat. Furthermore, it is pretty useless in areas in which you have things like reinforced concrete, because reinforced concrete, it cannot burrow through. It doesn't have the strength of force in its arms, nor the sharpness of teeth and claw to actually break the concrete. Instead, it would break its claws and its teeth. So that much said, there has to be some other creature in terms of fortified cities that breaks the foundations for it so it can move in. And once it is out of the ground, it is out of its native environment. Now, the bioelectric shock it generates, and the mention of gills, indicates this creature actually is more suited to water than it is to burrowing through the ground. Because bioelectric shock doesn't work very well out of water. Air is not the best conductor of electricity. That's why lightning strikes at the source of the lightning strike versus where the lightning strike actually impacts are only about a quarter of their original strength. In this case, it acts more like an electric eel, in that so long as it's in the water, it's incredibly lethal to be near. However, once you're out of the water, you would be relatively safe, except for on direct contact with the creature. So melee troops should beware, but if you brought a melt-a-bomb, it'll probably kill it. The flak armor, as a matter of fact, worn by guardsmen, is also non-conductive, which means that if it were to strike light armor troops, such as guardsmen or Tau infantry, the non-conductive armor would simply stop the electric shock altogether, no matter how powerful it was. It might leave a good burn mark and give the guardsman a good story, but he would survive the hit if it didn't actually hit his skin.
Now, take that into comparison with like a Space Marine Terminator or a Tau Crisis suit.
The power armored troops, however, would suffer greatly because said electrical charge would destroy their power packs, leaving their power armor as nothing more than extremely heavy weight to have to lug around, slowing them down considerably and not really protecting them. Furthermore, the black carapace that Space Marines wear to be able to integrate into their power armor would be completely fried. Your Space Marine would literally be delinked from his power armor, and he would only be able to move through sheer force of body. In addition to this, his electrical systems and his visor would be completely useless, so he'd have to take off his helmet just to function. And if you want spite purposes, the sheer amount of pain he would be in would almost kill him. And when I say sheer amount of pain, I literally mean the electrical shock isn't going to kill him, the pain will. Because he would have every single synapse in his body having been hit with an electrical charge. So, really effective versus heavy troops, really ineffective versus light troops. And again, the creature would not fare well in a straight up fight. Once the ambush is done, it has to get away from you, and if you can prevent it from getting away from you through some method, Excellent. Lastly, due to the sensory organs that it would use for these types of ambush tactics, it would actually be very vulnerable to sound weapons. Because it requires that sound vibration in order to detect vibrations in the ground properly. A sonic marine, hi Slanesh, how are you, would be the perfect counter to a Trigon.
In fact, so would Eldar with vibro cannon weapon platforms as well.
Mm-hmm. Hey Eldar, you won something. Congratulations.
Makes a change, doesn't it? We really should stop picking on the Eldar, but moving on. Next up is the Tyrannofex, which essentially is a mobile battle fortress in the form of a giant bug. Now, these things have a massive cannon fused into its torso, and it is the largest, most destructive Tyranid weapon carried by anything smaller than a Bio-Titan. Now, there are 3 known variations of this cannon. You have the acid spray cannon, the flesh borer hive, which shoots a nice salvo of flesh-eating beetles at you, and the rupture cannon, which launches essentially 2 cannonballs in quick succession. One bursts upon impact, showering the target in oil, and the other one is essentially a seed pod, which causes a massive implosion. These things also are known to emit stress pheromones, which basically means if these get engaged in close combat where they're not very good, it will basically summon every nearby Tyranid creature on the battlefield to come and assist it.
So, the Tyrannofex has the poorest sloping of its plate of any creature that we've seen. The slopes come out to at most 10 degrees, meaning many ranged weapons will get direct hits upon it. Furthermore, it turns out that the hardness of its skin will not repel its own acid. So if you rupture the acid sac that it uses as one of its primary projectile weapons, it will in fact kill itself by literally digesting itself alive. Only its stomach and mouth are actually capable of repelling the acid it sprays. Similar to a xenomorph from Alien, in that once you pierce the skin, the acid that gets sprayed out of its body will actually melt its own body. Furthermore, the flesh borer variant seems a bit counterintuitive in the fact that it has to fire its cannon or die, because the beetles breed so rapidly they will actually cause the Tyrannofex to explode. That's a huge drawback. One I would have thought that the Tyranids would, evolve past very quickly, but apparently not. There is no cutoff mechanism to prevent the beetles from breeding. Furthermore, if the beetles get outside of the ammunition sac, they will actually feed on the Tyrannofex itself. Seems like a huge, human resources problem when your ammunition will eat your soldier.
Yeah.
The rupture cannon, however, is the one that's interesting. The flesh borer is really nice against infantry. The acid spray actually comes out that it will cause damage to armored vehicles, but not actually melt through them with a single hit. It has to hit repeatedly in order to actually get enough acid onto the same spot to melt straight through the vehicle. But the rupture cannon is the interesting one, and here's why. It completely breaks physics. It breaks the realm of physics straight into science fantasy. The cannon effectively, if my understanding of this is correct, is a biologically driven miniature black hole generator.
Yep.
The fuck? I have no idea how you would manage to create this. Not only this, it breaks the laws of physics, biology, and engineering in every way, shape, and form. Because such a weapon, I don't even think could exist. So, yeah, I have no idea how you would counter this. Or how you would deal with it. Other than you would probably want to get those 2 ammunition sacks to rupture at the same time and center on the Tyrannofex. However, I'm going to warn you, that multiple miniature black holes in the same spot have this odd habit of creating actual black holes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that anyone would have accounted for that, but I think the planet just got sucked into a black hole. Whoops!
Never mind.
Its ability to call for help and its lack of actual close combat defenses indicate serious flaws. The Tyrannofax is strictly a pack hunter. It needs a pack to survive. It is not a solo hunter, and it needs a pack of non-Tyrannofaxes to survive, effectively meaning it has to create symbiotic relationships with other Tyranids. So you really have to have a synapse creature near this creature in order to properly control the swarm so that this creature can be functional in combat. Basically, instead of killing the Tyrannofax, kill everything around it and then engage the Tyrannofax if possible. Because at which point it won't really be able to defend itself.